Hello, welcome to the first episode of Science for Grade 7. I am Teacher Richard and today I will discuss the first topic for the first quarter. I will try to simplify everything in your module so that you will be able to understand the content of your module. So let's go. Let's proceed. So scientific ways of acquiring knowledge and solving problems would be our first topic for this first quarter. This is based from the most essential learning competency, which is describe the components of a scientific investigation. After this lesson, you should be able to first define scientific investigation and enumerate the steps of scientific investigation. So what do we mean when we say scientific investigation? So scientific investigation is a quest to find the answer to a question using the scientific method. In turn, the scientific method is a systematic process that involves using measurable observations to formulate, test, or modify a hypothesis. So when we say scientific investigation, basically you're just finding or seeking answers to a certain problem by or using the scientific method. So what are the steps in scientific method? We have first identifying problems or identify the problem, formulate the hypothesis, testing the hypothesis or do an experiment, record and analyze the data, and lastly you make conclusion. So first, how do you identify the problem? So you have to identify the problem by observation or through observation. So observation is the gathering of information through the five senses. I think you already know what are your five senses. So in order for you to identify a certain problem, you have to use your five senses. So take note that a good problem should be SMART, S-M-A-R-T. So when we say SMART, it is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So when we say specific, it means that there is only one problem. Next, measurable, you can do observation or you can observe the problem. Attainable, meaning achievable yung problem mo, meaning you can solve that problem. Kayang-kaya gawin or kaya mo isolbar dito ang problema. Next, relevant, it should be within, when we say relevant, napapanahon. Time-bound, meaning kaya mong tapusin yung or you can solve the problem within that certain period of time. So example of a problem or sample of a problem is this one. Does plant needs sunlight to grow? So that is a problem. So next is you formulate the hypothesis. So what is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is a potential answer to a question that can be tested by gathering information. So sample hypothesis is this one. So problema natin kanina is do plants need sunlight in order for them to grow? So yung hypothesis mo is that no, plants don't need sunlight to grow. When we say hypothesis, ito yung parang it's a guess based from other observations. At yun yung itetest mo. After that, you can now conduct your experiment to test your hypothesis. So we have here an example of a plants, sample 1 and sample 2. So since ang tinitignan mo dun sa since yung problema or the problem is if kailangan ng sunlight ng mga plants. So yung isang plant mo nilagay mo sa ilalim ng araw, and yung isa inilagay mo naman or kinontain mo siya sa isang box or iniligay mo siya sa isang madilim na sulok sa inyong bahay. And that is your doing the experiment. You test the hypothesis. In experimenting, the things that are changing in an experiment are called variables. So in experimentation, may tinatawag tayong variables. These variables are factors, trait, or condition that can exist in different amounts or types. It could be of three types. So may tatlong uri ng variable. We have independent variable, dependent variable, and a constant variable. So when we say independent variable, this is the variable being manipulated, or chosen and controlled by the researcher. Dependent variable is the effect or a variable being measured as a result. Yung hinahanap mong resulta. And lastly, constant or controlled variables are factors that are kept uniform throughout the experiment. So let's go back to the problem a while back. So yung isang halaman nilagay mo sa ilalim ng araw and the other one you place it in a shady area. So that yung location ng mga plants na yon ay matatawag natin na independent variable. So the location where you place those plants are considered as the independent variable, and the dependent variable there is if the plant will grow sa lilim or sa under the sunlight. That is the dependent variable. Yun yung tinitignan mong effect. And the constant or controlled variables are yung same yung soil, same type of plants, same yung nilalagay mong tubig dun sa parehong plants na yon. We call those as constant kasi hindi yun yung factor na tinitignan mo in that experiment. Ang tinitignan mo lang is if there's an effect of the sunlight to the plants. Now, during an experiment, scientists must record all his or her observations. So, bakit kailangan i-record immediately? Una, you have to record it immediately so that para hindi mo makalimutan kung ano yung mga observations mo. Yun. Kung mag-observe ka na ng iyong experiment, you have to jot down all the important observations that you have observed to the plants. Kung may mga changes ba dun sa leaf, kung may changes ba dun sa growth, tumangkad ba yung plant, something like that. You have to record all those observations immediately. And once your experiment is complete, you collect your measurements and analyze them to see if they support your hypothesis or not. Often, you will prepare a table or graph of the data. So, in order for you to, nag-observe ka na after the experiment, you have to record your data. It could be in a table form or in a graph form. So, I have here an example of a table wherein dito nyo ilalagay yung mga observations nyo. So we have here day 1, day 2 hanggang day 30 siguro, depende kung hanggang kailan mo i-observe yung plant mo. So we have two types of plants. We have with sunlight at yung without sunlight. Ito yung mga independent variable na tinitingnan mo kung may effect ba yung sunlight dun sa plant or dun sa plant na walang sunlight. So you have to write there dabatog na di dyan observation mo. So with sunlight, surat mo met pigi dyan observation mo. The green di color di leaf, the yellow di color di leaf, something like that. You have to place all your observation in there. So after you gather the data, you can now analyze the data and make conclusions. So when we say conclusion, it means a judgment or decision reached by reasoning. You conclude whether to accept or reject your hypothesis. So after 30 days of doing the experiment, ang napansin mo, yung sample 1 na nasa ilalim ng araw ay mas lumago, while the other one, yung nasa lilim, died. So pwede ka nang mag-conclude if the sun is kailangan ng mga plants or hindi. So from that experiment, napansin mo na in order for the plant to live or survive, they need the sun. At pag walang sun, mamamatay yung mga halaman. So you can now make your conclusion that plants need sunlight in order for them to grow. So that's it. So let's recall the step in scientific method. We have identifying the problem, formulating hypothesis, next is testing the hypothesis or doing an experiment, record and analyze the data, and you have to make conclusion. So that's it for today. I hope you have learned something about scientific method, the different steps, and what are the different kinds of variables in an experiment. See you for the next session. Goodbye. Thank you for watching this video.